Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism, narcissistic relationships, and most importantly, healing from narcissistic relationships. So, you know me, I love reading the news and learning about the terrible ways people can treat each other. So let's take a look at how bad it can get and how the really bad behavior that people can rationalize. So I read an article the other day about some really fancy people. And my guess is, now I actually thought many people didn't read the story, but now more people are talking about it. So maybe more people read the story than I thought, even though the people involved are really esoteric. The people in this story, one was some ballet director person. The other one was a dance critic. Again, not people that most of us are concerned with. The ballet director guy was somebody who's viewed rather grandiosely as the greatest choreographer guy for ballet in Europe. He staged a new ballet, and a dance critic came to see this new ballet, and she wrote a pretty scathing review of it. It happens. People write mean reviews. We live in an era of mean people, so mean reviews aren't exactly a shocker. She's a critic. She criticized. But it doesn't end there. That ballet guy sees the dance critic at some other dance performance, having already read the bad review. He goes up to her and he asks, why did she write what she did? And then he grabs a bag of dog feces from his pocket and smears it in her face. There's also the other question of who carries feces in their pocket to the ballet, but I'm going to have to let that question rest. Now, since he did this, there has been lots of hand-wringing in the European dance world. They wrote it off as an impulsive act. He claims in one report that, he goes on to say that he has apologized profusely. He also wanted to make it less about the dog poop and more about the idea that critics should not be allowed to write such scathing reviews. Now that sounds like a justification to me. She's a critic. She criticized him. I would imagine that that's the job. It sounded like he wasn't happy that she had only written nice reviews about him twice. And then he turned around and made it about gender. One of his colleagues, where he works, was really effusive in praising him. She called him respectful, empathic. She said this behavior was out of character. I hope so. And then she went on to say his mom was sick, his dog was sick. Let's go back to the initial point. He carried dog feces in his pocket. He saw her. He went up to her. He talked to her. And then he rubbed them in her face. That is intentional behavior. It's not as though they got into a spontaneous shoving match and he grabbed some nearby dog poop on the floor and shoved it in her face. He had numerous moments where he could have decided not to approach her, not to talk to her, and certainly not to have rubbed shit in her face. The metaphor is not lost on me. Now, from a narcissism perspective, this thin-skinned sensitivity is something we often see in narcissistic abuse. Listen, I have no idea if this guy is narcissistic. I have never heard of him. I will never probably hear about him again. But this behavior falls under the clear rubric of antagonistic behavior. To be so thin-skinned that when someone does something you don't like, you feel like you can lash out in this way. All the hand-wringing. He's so creative. He's a great choreographer. Critics need to write nicer reviews so people keep coming to the ballet and supporting it. He is honorable, empathic, respectful. His dog was sick. His mom was sick. This enabling, justifying mess. Just know and stop. He intentionally rubbed dog poop in a woman's face because his feelings got hurt. When we talk about narcissistic behavior, we often get caught up in the gaslighting, manipulative, unempathic, entitled stuff. It misses some of the other dynamics, especially the thin-skinned hyperreactivity. This pattern, the thin-skinnedness, is what leads to the walking on eggshells. You never know what will set them off, or You don't allow yourself to offer any form of feedback or critique because you don't know how they will react. It'll usually be awful, maybe not poop in the face, but rage, cruel clapback, or dysregulation. A familiar enabling refrain when people are reflecting on narcissistic behaviors is that, I was just being impulsive. They didn't mean it. They're going through a lot. Or my favorite, it wasn't intentional. Now, given the very low likelihood of a poop bag being a normal accessory to take to the ballet, who knows, maybe this dog of his that was sick was with him, and maybe he did take him out to do his business, and then you take the bag and you put it in the trash, right? And the multiple moments he could have made the choice not to approach this woman. And even if she got into his face, to walk away, it's intentional. His behavior was a choice. There were 3 to 4 steps up to that moment, if not more. His feelings were hurt, his insecurity was activated, and somehow that made it okay to react. And when the people around him are supporting that and not calling the behavior out as unacceptable, listen, he may be a dance genius. I don't know, and it doesn't matter. Being a genius, being an artist, being a tortured soul, being a creative thinker, it doesn't matter. All of this stuff cannot be an excuse for unacceptable behavior, and least of all, because you didn't like a person's assessment of your work. For most of us, if we decided to go dog poop on people's faces every time they criticized us, let me tell you, it would be a messy world. You may be wondering, oh, come on, it's one little petty incident. I'm not so sure. I think that these kinds of petty incidents are becoming a lot more common. And I think that this sort of universal thin-skinnedness coupled with impulsivity and the willingness of so many people to rationalize and justify. I was reading yet another story here in LA about somebody who defrauded one of these PPP things and then went ahead and used that fraud money to buy all kinds of extravagant things. And the people around were saying, he's actually a really great guy, but then something, his drinking caught up with him. No, this is a person who engaged in a bad action and now there's a consequence. I don't know if Dance Guy lost his job. I don't know what's going to happen to him. But for all the rest of us who live in the real world, these kinds of instances are happening more and more, and it gives you an understanding of how much this stuff is enabled by the world at large. And we are actually much more likely to enable that kind of behavior when somebody behaves in such an inappropriate, impulsive way than we are to hold space for people who are often having to grapple with these really difficult relationships. So check out the article. This was a thing. It really happened. I couldn't believe it. There were lots of articles about it. And I gotta say, there were way too many people breaking a sweat trying to understand Mr. Dog Poop's behavior. Thanks again.